As we sat in the restaurant, the air heavy with the aroma of the lavish meal before us, my mother-in-law's words cut through the atmosphere like a sharp knife. "Do you truly believe there's a place for you here?" she sneered, her tone dripping with disdain. Her eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on me as she added, "You're just a daughter-in-law, not blood." A smirk played on her lips as she waved her hand dismissively, as though shooing away an unwelcome guest. It was a gesture that felt like a blatant invitation to leave, and the anger that welled up within me was almost palpable. My hands trembled as I pushed back my chair, preparing to stand and exit the room. But before I could take a single step, she halted me with a raised hand. "Wait," she commanded, her voice laced with mockery. "If you're leaving early, at least leave the money." The smirk on her face widened, as if she had already won this twisted game. I met her gaze, unflinching, with a defiant smile. "Why would I pay for a stranger's bill?" I retorted, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "My name is Maya, a 29-year-old office worker, and for the most part, my husband Tyrell and I are content in our relationship. But there has always been one persistent issue that casts a shadow over our happiness, my overbearing mother-in-law. We live close to her, and she has made it her mission to invade our lives at every opportunity. She criticizes everything, from my cooking to my homemaking skills, all under the guise of being a concerned mother. She would barge into our home uninvited, armed with a key that Tyrell had given her, and point out every flaw she could find. Worse, she would spread lies about me to the neighbors, tarnishing my reputation. I often complained to Tyrell, hoping he would see the truth, but he never did. To him, his mother was just a loving parent who cared deeply for us. He was blind to her manipulations, and no matter how much I tried to make him understand, he remained indifferent, too busy with his work to notice the turmoil she was causing. As time passed, her intrusions only grew worse. Every time she entered our home, it felt like an invasion of my personal space, a violation of the life Tyrell and I were trying to build together. I pleaded with him to move away, to put some distance between us and his mother, but he dismissed my concerns. Then, a turning point arrived. Tyrell's success at work led to a promotion and a significant salary increase. I saw this as the perfect opportunity to suggest expanding our family. Now that our income has grown, perhaps it's time to think about having children, I proposed, hoping that this positive change might finally open his eyes to the toxic presence of his mother. But if we're considering having children, I prefer to live in a more child-friendly town. There are very few childcare centers here, and no parks for children to play in. Isn't it time for us to move? To my relief, Tyrell responded positively. For the first time, he agreed that moving might be a good idea, and I was happier about this than the news of his promotion. Finally, it seemed like we were on the same page. But that feeling didn't last long. The very next day, my mother-in-law showed up unannounced, as usual. I was fed up, assuming she had come to nag again, but something seemed different this time. "I've decided to celebrate my son's promotion," she announced, a strange glint in her eye. "I've reserved a table at a very expensive restaurant. It's elegant, the food is top-notch, and the staff's attitude is wonderful. It has a great reputation," she said, her tone suggesting that she expected me to be impressed. She then extended an invitation, asking me to join them for the celebration. "That's nice. Good for you," I replied, trying to be polite, though I felt anything but. Her sudden change in demeanor was unsettling, and I couldn't help but be suspicious. "Well, never mind," she continued, unfazed by my lack of enthusiasm. "I want you to come to this restaurant too. Please come." "I'll check my schedule, but it's probably impossible," I said, hoping to avoid the event altogether. "Don't say that. We'll be waiting for you," she insisted, her words more of a command than an invitation. Even though I had no intention of going, she left with a smirk on her face, as if she knew something I didn't. Until now, she had always excluded me, making it clear that I was not part of the family. But now, suddenly, she was inviting me, insisting that I attend. Something was definitely going on, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was some sort of trap. When Tyrell came home, I asked him about it. To my surprise, he had already told his mother that we would be attending together. "She reserved the restaurant for us, and I'm looking forward to it. You feel the same, don't you, Maya?" he asked, oblivious to my unease. "Sorry, but I'm not looking forward to it," I admitted. "I don't know how much money it will cost at such an expensive place, and I don't want to go. Just say I have urgent business and enjoy yourself." "Why are you thinking so negatively?" Tyrell responded, his excitement undimmed. "Besides, it's not just us going. My brothers are bringing their wives too. It would be bad if you didn't come. The whole family is going." Even though I didn't want to, I felt compelled to comply. My words no longer seemed to reach Tyrell. If he believed his mother more than me, there was nothing I could do. That's when I decided to record her harassment. I bought a voice recorder online, planning to use it at the celebration. I was certain she would try to harass me again, and I would finally have the proof I needed. If Tyrell still defended her after hearing the recording, I would consider divorce. With that decision made, I felt a bit better, but the thought of meeting my mother-in-law at the restaurant still filled me with dread. The day of the celebration arrived, and I could hardly muster the energy to get ready. I hardly knew Tyrell's brothers, having only met them briefly at our wedding, and I had no memory of talking to their wives beyond simple greetings. When we arrived at the restaurant, the waiter led us to a large room where my mother-in-law, her other 2 sons, and their wives were already seated. A lavish spread adorned the table, with just one vacant seat left. Tyrell, puzzled, tilted his head in confusion. Did the waiter make a mistake with the number of seats? He wondered aloud. I'll go ask. Everyone start eating, he said, leaving the room to sort out the seating issue. The moment he stepped out, my mother-in-law stood up, her expression twisting into a sneer. There's no seat for you, she spat out, her voice dripping with malice. Why should I invite a stranger who just married my son to a family celebration? Her words were like poison, each one designed to wound. So I'll give you a choice, show your sincerity and be accepted as family, or leave and never show your face to me again. Choose now. I'm leaving, I answered without hesitation. Her face faltered for just a moment, clearly not expecting me to stand my ground. Listen to the end, she snapped. If you pay the entire bill here, I'll recognize you as Tyrell's wife. You must be frustrated being treated as a stranger, so pay up and become family. I told you, I'm leaving. Why should I pay for someone else's family's bill? I retorted, turning my back on her. Mother-in-law slammed the table in frustration. Don't you get it? I'm offering to make you family. Are you okay with being a stranger? Pay up. No, I'm fine being a stranger. Since I'm a stranger, I won't pay. Pay for your own meal. Goodbye, I replied firmly. She chased after me, but by the time she reached the entrance of the room, I was already at the exit of the restaurant. I walked out without looking back, my mind made up. When I got home, I was about to email Tyrell about what happened, but he returned within 10 minutes. He had gone to sort out the reservation, but I didn't even give him the chance to explain. The damage had already been done. The situation began when my mother, who had the correct phone number, caused a scene at a family gathering. I learned the details from my brother and felt sorry for making you feel uncomfortable. You managed to leave quickly, and according to my brother, my earlier statement that I was okay being a stranger seemed to resonate with the eldest son's wife and the third son's wife. They had previously believed that silently enduring harassment was their only option, but seeing me speak up inspired them to do the same. Encouraged by this, both women decided to leave the gathering, and their husbands, the eldest and third sons, hurried after them. I anticipated complaints from my mother-in-law, and sure enough, within 3 hours, the phone started ringing nonstop. The calls were so disruptive that I eventually had to block them. However, one call managed to get through from an unknown number. When I answered, a man on the other end identified himself as a police officer from the local station. He explained that after everyone left, my mother-in-law had attempted to eat alone and later tried to make me pay the bill. The restaurant staff, already displeased with her behavior earlier, refused to let her charge the meal to me. They assumed that I wouldn't return to settle the bill after leaving in anger and ignoring all her calls. The staff suggested she pay by card, but my mother-in-law didn't have a credit card and didn't bring enough cash to cover everyone's meals. In desperation, she tried contacting other family members for help, but no one responded. Feeling frustrated and cornered, she began yelling and blaming me for the situation. Her anger escalated to the point where she damaged several expensive vases and flower pots in the restaurant. The chaos prompted the restaurant to call the police. When the officers arrived, they managed to calm her down, but she stubbornly refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing. The restaurant, now stuck with an unpaid bill and a troublesome customer, sought help in escorting her home. Feeling guilty for ignoring a call from the police, my husband and I reluctantly returned to the restaurant. When we arrived, we found my mother-in-law being pacified by the police. As soon as she saw me, she glared and, crossing her arms, screamed, "You good for nothing. This happened because you didn't pay the bill. It's natural to help your mother, isn't it? Pay up now." I was utterly shocked by her behavior, especially in front of the police. They had made it clear that if no one took her home, they would either escort her to her in-laws' house in a patrol car or arrest her for dining and dashing. I responded coldly, "Please take her away, arrest her or whatever it takes, just make her take responsibility." My mother-in-law's eyes widened in shock at my words. "How can you say something so cold? I can't believe it. Just pay up, it's bad to have a family member arrested," she pleaded. "I don't care," I replied. I'm not family, and I don't want to be associated with someone who's acting crazy and causing a scene. I then attempted to leave the restaurant, leaving the police to handle the situation. However, my husband, who had remained silent throughout, suddenly glared at me. I understand that what was said and done to Maya was terrible, but is it really something bad enough to be arrested for? He asked, defending his mother. You're missing the point, I retorted. She's in trouble with the police because she dined and dashed and caused a scene at the restaurant. I have nothing to do with it. Or are you saying that I'm at fault for not paying for 6 people's meals when I didn't even eat? My husband fell silent but walked past me toward the police and the restaurant staff. I knew what he intended to do, and as he approached them, I called out, if you're going to pay for her meal and compensate them, we're getting divorced. Think about that. He didn't respond, but he silently took out his wallet. Sighing, I left the restaurant and walked home, feeling a mix of frustration and resignation. Once home, I started packing my essential belongings, preparing to leave. Just before midnight, my husband finally returned. Mom's not getting arrested, he said, his voice weary. It turns out she was really in the wrong, but the restaurant said they'd forgive her if I compensated them and promised she'd never come back. I didn't have nearly enough money, so I had my brothers come and help. I'm so tired, he explained, clearly exhausted. He continued to ramble about what had happened after I left, seemingly annoyed by my lack of reaction. Then he noticed my packed bags. Hey, what's with these bags? He asked, puzzled. I'm preparing to leave the house because we're getting divorced, I replied firmly. I told you that if you defended her, we'd get divorced. You're not going to say you didn't hear me, are you? My husband looked at me with wide eyes, astonished. Then he began to yell, what's going on today? You've been acting strange all day. I understand that Mom did something terrible, but why do we have to get divorced? I responded with calm determination, I've told you before that I'm being harassed, and even with evidence and other people's testimony, you still chose your mother, who was almost arrested, over me. Is it strange that I want to divorce someone like that? After enduring enough of my husband's incessant complaints and disrespectful remarks, I reached my breaking point. His words became meaningless to me, drifting in one ear and out the other. Determined to take control of my life, I decided to leave him. The next morning, I wasted no time in obtaining the necessary divorce papers. When I presented them to him, he initially resisted, creating a scene and insisting that he didn't want a divorce. However, when I mentioned the possibility of involving a lawyer, he begrudgingly signed the papers. I immediately submitted them, and finally, I felt liberated, like I was returning to a life where we were nothing more than strangers. Following the divorce, my husband moved out of our home and returned to live with his parents. He had relied on me for nearly all the household chores, so when left to manage on his own, the house quickly became a disaster. Unwilling to live in such disarray, he eventually canceled his apartment lease and settled back at his parents' house. Interestingly, his 2 brothers, the eldest and the third, faced similar predicaments. On the day my ex-husband called his brothers for help with some compensation issue, both of them ended up in fierce arguments with their own wives. The brothers had decided to dip into their savings to assist their mother without consulting their spouses. Their wives were understandably furious, refusing to bear the financial burden for something that was their mother-in-law's fault. Yet, the brothers, believing their mother's manipulative words, feared legal repercussions and foolishly sided with her. This caused their wives' love for them to diminish rapidly, leading both marriages to the brink of divorce. Both brothers eventually moved back in with their parents, refusing to take on any household responsibilities. In the end, my ex-mother-in-law found herself back at her home, surrounded by her 3 grown sons, who were essentially overgrown children. The neighborhood quickly caught wind of the situation, and the entire family became the subject of ridicule. Gossip spread about how all 3 brothers had been abandoned by their wives, and my mother-in-law's attempts to dismiss the rumors only made things worse. She adamantly defended her sons, blaming us ex-wives for their failures, while the husbands smugly convinced themselves that divorcing us had been the right choice. Despite their efforts to tarnish my reputation, I maintained a good relationship with the neighbors, who knew all too well about my mother-in-law's toxic personality. No one believed the stories she spun. Instead, they quietly laughed at her and pitted her sons for their misguided loyalty. My ex-mother-in-law became infamous as a failed parent who couldn't properly raise her sons, while the men gained a reputation as mama's boys who chose to defend their mother over their wives. As for me, I severed all ties with my ex-husband and his family. I changed my contact information, moved to a new home, and they eventually lost track of me. I heard through the grapevine that they continued to live bitterly, constantly complaining about their situation. But I, on the other hand, found my life to be infinitely more peaceful and fulfilling without them. Free from the stress of dealing with my ex-mother-in-law, I've enjoyed making new friends and rediscovering my independence. In fact, during the divorce process, I formed close bonds with the ex-wives of my ex-husband's eldest and third brothers. We shared similar grievances about the family, and our shared experiences brought us together. Now, we regularly meet up for meals, go shopping on weekends, and truly enjoy each other's company. I sometimes even feel that I owe my ex-husband a small thanks for inadvertently leading me to such wonderful friendships. We're planning to visit a new cafe together in a few days, and I couldn't be more excited. From now on, I'm free to live life on my own terms, without the weight of toxic relationships holding me back. This newfound freedom feels more liberating than I could have ever imagined. I'm genuinely grateful for the friendships I've found, and I believe I would still be living a lonely, isolated life if it weren't for them. They've made my life brighter and more joyful, and I sincerely hope our bond continues forever.